up everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel, and today I'm going to be grading every AFL team season for 2022. I know I am late to the party in this one. I've had a few people saying,
oh, if you don't get it out the week after the footy season's finished, it's an irrelevant video and I do crap.
But I don't really care. I want to do it. I did one last year. I'm not the first person in this video, that's for sure. Look it up on screen. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter at all. So I'll be grading every single team's season. The highest mark that a team can get is A+, and the lowest is going to be an F. So we'll get right into it. Alphabetical order, starting at the Adelaide Crows. They finished 14th, and I think coming into the season, they were expected to finish bottom 4 again. So in terms of all that, I reckon they did surpass expectations by a bit. And the Crows, well, they were a team that made it tough to beat them. Like, if you wanted to beat the Crows, you needed to grind it out, and you really needed to play 4 quarters of good footy, particularly at the Adelaide Oval, because they weren't very easy beasts. Par a couple of games, especially the game against Port Adelaide in the showdown at the end of the year. But still, like, I think the Crows definitely had a solid season in terms of their rebuild. They're definitely going in an upwards direction, that's for sure. They had a better year than last year. They took a few really good scalps, beating the Tigers, the Bulldogs, and also they beat the Blues. So all things considered, I'm going to give Adelaide a C marking. I think they had a fairly respectable season and definitely a pass mark for them. Now we've got Brisbane next, and Brisbane's a bit of a tough one because you'd think leading into the season the Lions were expecting to at least make the grand final or win the flag. They didn't do any of that. They didn't even make the top 4. They finished 6th and had a really disappointing end of the season. But at the end of the day, they had a really good final series, and that probably carries their mark, or at least improves it. They got 2 wins, 2 upset wins you would say, but they did have a very disappointing loss against the Cats. I reckon if that loss was any closer against the Cats, their mark would be a bit higher. But I'm going to give them a B, to be honest. They won 2 finals, but the home and away season was a little bit of a letdown. And I think deep down the Lions know they can play better footy. So because of that, I'm going to give the Lions a B. Carlton is also a very difficult team. Do I want to be very harsh on them, or do I want to be lenient and respect their season? Because as a whole, or at least at the start, a very successful season for the Blues, especially at the start. I mean, they started 8-2. Surely at 8-2, you look at that and go, oh, that's a finals lock right there. Obviously, they didn't end up making finals, so that's where I'm going to go over a little bit later on. But we definitely saw some progression from the Blues. Charlie Curnow had a really good year, won the Coleman. Paddy Cripps won the Brownlow. Individually wise, the Blues had a lot of stars, but again, they weren't able to gel as a team at the end of the season. For the Blues, 4 losses in a row to end up finishing 9th in tragic fashion against the Pies. You just can't put them in the B territory. That's reserved for teams who make the finals, you would think. And with such a disappointing way to finish the season, I'm still going to give the Blues a C+, because leading into the season, I don't think Blues fans were expecting to see their team be in the 8 for 22 rounds, albeit not making in the last round. A solid year, but certainly a very disappointing and underwhelming season. And you could argue, well, it's a failure of a season because they still didn't even make finals. Now we get to Collingwood, and of course the Pies, they were expected. Many tipped them to finish in the bottom 4. I tipped them to finish last, and they finished in the top 4. And leaving it at just that, that is an automatic A for me, to be honest. Like, they surpassed literally everyone's expectation. They couldn't have asked for a better year, to be honest. Well, unless they won the flag. That's genuinely the only thing that could have been better for their year. But literally everything went their way. I'm pretty sure their coach, Craig McRae, he ended up winning Coach of the Year. The Pies just had an incredible season, winning all the close games. Just an incredible roller coaster of a season for the Pies. And they were 1 point away from being in the granny and certainly challenging the Cats a lot more than the Swans did. So for me, I'm going to give them an A. If they would have beaten the Swans in the prelim, I would have probably given them an A+, even if they didn't end up winning the whole thing. We head to Essendon, and Essendon's season was certainly a letdown. There's no way that I'm giving the Bombers a higher grading than a D. In fact, I'll probably give them a D-. They ended up finishing 15th. They just had a disaster of a season, just lackluster performance after lackluster performance, especially in the first half of the season. They had a decent period where they got a few wins, but then they fell away back to how they started the season. And that bloody performance against Port Adelaide was the most dismal performance I think I've seen a side put out the whole season, to be honest. Like, that was just terrible. They weren't trying. It's as if they checked out. Ended up losing their coach. Their coach got sacked. It was a disaster of a year, and really nothing went right for the Bombers, to be honest. And especially considering they made the finals last year, so they had a lot of high expectations to back it up and make finals again and even win one. They ended up finishing bottom 4, and that essentially puts you in the D- position for me. Fremantle, well, they certainly had a successful season, finishing 5th after countless years of lingering around that 9th to 13th position. They finally made the finals, and it was a huge step in the right direction for the Freo because they almost made the top 4. They finished 5th. They genuinely were 1 point away from finishing the top 4 if the Blues just bloody fucking won. Again, the Dockers, they saw a lot of growth from their young players. Obviously, Brayshaw had a breakout year. Sarong is getting better. Lockie Young had a really good season. The Dockers, well, they're currently building onto something. They're in the premiership window at the moment. There's certainly a chance of possibly winning the flag in the coming years. And for mine, After tipped to possibly make the finals, we're unsure whether they'll actually go out and make it. To almost finish 4th and win a final in the fashion that they did, that's an A for me. But probably just an A- since they didn't go all the way and only just won the one final. Now Geelong, the easiest mark I can give any side, an A+. You win the flag, you win 16 games in a row. What more can I say, really? The Cats just did literally everything right. They were just extremely impressive since round 9. Ever so slowly throughout the season, they progressively got better as a side. They gelled as a team. I don't think a bad thing I can say about the Cats. I think they got like 4 or 5 players in the All-Australian side. Tyson Stengel had an awesome year. Yeah, the Cats an A+, winning the flag by 81 points. A perfect year, really, for Geelong. Now, we go next to the Suns, and the Suns certainly a season in the right direction for them. I think the most wins in a season, I might be wrong, not the highest ladder position, though. They finished 11th one year, and they finished 12th this year. But their highest percentage, I would like to say, ending up with a percentage of over 100, I think, for the first time. So, very, very good signs for the Suns this year they definitely had. They had a lot of very impressive games. And it was good that we didn't see a drop-off from them. Like, we saw a slight drop-off, but typically in previous seasons, the Suns always start the season off high and very, very strong, and then they always fade away massively. But we didn't really see that as much from the Suns this year, and they had a very good end to the season with a 67-point win to North Melbourne. They're a chance to make finals next year, the Suns. That's the thing. That's probably going to be their target for the year. For me, I reckon I'll give the Suns a C. Based on expectation, they certainly surpassed them, similar to how the Crows surpassed theirs. Now, for GWS, I reckon I'll give them a similar grading to Essendon in a D- category. Very, very similar to the Giants. A very similar season. They lost their coach. They were tipped to make finals after making the finals the previous season. In fact, they'll probably tip to finish higher with their list. They've got such a good list, or at least they had such a good list, losing now a lot of players in the trade period, which could see them slide even a few more positions down. But as a season of a whole, it was just an underwhelming one for the Giants. They were just very mediocre, lackluster, didn't really provide too much of an effort. And it was just disappointing for the Giants. I think they ended up finishing 16th, so that says it all. That's a D- right there. Now for Hawthorn, I'm going to give them a C+, considering that they were also probably tipped to finish in the bottom 4. And Sammy did an incredible job of not ensuring that occurs. In fact, they ended up finishing 13th. And they had a lot of very impressive games. They beat the Lions. They took it up to the best sides in the Ds as well. In saying that though, the Hawks, being the young side that they are, they were inconsistent, obviously, in games, losing big against the Suns, I remember. But I think they ended up winning 8 games, so not bad for them. Sam Mitchell is taking them somewhere, I believe. But it's still going to be a slow progression for Hawthorn, but a C+ season for mine. For Melbourne, now it's a tricky one for the Ds, because they finished second. And especially the first half of the year, they looked unstoppable. Like, they genuinely looked like a side that could go the whole season without dropping a game. But then when they started playing some tougher opponents, actually teams in the top 8, that's where the holes started to appear for the Ds. And we saw the 3 losses in a row in the middle of the season. They started the season 10-0 and they finished the season 6-6 playing against some tougher opponents. So that just sort of goes to show that they had a drop-off of form, and it led into finals when they didn't even get to win a single game. That was the most disappointing aspect of their season. Dropping out in straight sets in 2 home finals is very disappointing. And because of that, I'm giving them a B-. Now North Melbourne, I did say the lowest grade I can give a side is an F, and I think it's pretty safe to say that North Melbourne's season this year was an F. They were a shambles this season, to be honest. Countless performances where they got done by more than 50 plus points. They at one stage had a percentage of under 50%, I think, in the midway through the season. They only got the 2 wins. One of the wins shouldn't even have occurred, considering they played West Coast Waffle side and only won by 15. They were deplorable in that game as well, in which they won. And were very lucky to walk away the win against the Tigers, where they scored 22 behind. So, yeah, they had a coach that was sacked. Horn Francis, now their number 1 draft pick, is gone. Couldn't be any worse for North Melbourne, but at least they've got Clarko, so they can hold on to a little bit of hope there. Port Adelaide's a tough one as well. A very tricky side to grade. They had an absolutely shocking start to the season, starting 0-5. And let's just put things in perspective. I tipped them to win the flag this year. Like, many people had them in their top 4s again and possibly making a grand final. They start 0-5 and that's their season done. Like, they're just playing catch up and it was just too difficult for them. They were better after that point on, but they still, in those remaining games, didn't seem like they were the side they were last year. Just weren't good enough, weren't up to the standard, were just a mediocre side. They finished the season off strongly with some good wins, some big wins, but against some poorer sides. It wasn't a good season for Port Adelaide. They didn't really get much out of it at all. For me, that's a D+. We head to Richmond's season, and Richmond's season was certainly a success, I would say. They almost underachieved, I would say. Like, they had so many games where they probably should have won. They either screwed up, messed up, they choked, lost by under a goal. They should have won probably 3 or 4 more games that they didn't, which would have put them to the top 4. But Richmond, at times, they just looked unstoppable. The highest scoring side this season. They had a slow start to the year, but after that Melbourne game, they were genuinely in every single game they played in. The biggest loss from then on till the end of the season was, I think, 6 points. So they just were in every game they play. They've got a great culture, the Tigers. For me, though, I'm going to give the Tigers a B. They ended up finishing 7th, but a 7th place position probably doesn't do them justice. I think they're definitely a team that was better than what they finished. St Kilda is a bit of a tricky one. In a way, they're similar to Carlton, polar opposite half of the year. Started like a house on fire, and it was just a very disappointing season for the Saints. They treated the season like a sprint, not a marathon. And the most disappointing thing about the loss is the way we lost. It's as if we weren't trying at times in some of the games, especially the Sydney game. That was probably the worst loss, I would say, at least to be a part of. Yeah, we gave in, essentially, the Saints. They gave in, and it was a very unfortunate way to finish the season. Expectation-wise, they were probably tipped to finish around the 10th mark. I'd had them in the finals, but considering their start and just the way that they lost a lot of those games at the end, I think the Saints, to be honest, were almost a bottom 4 side if we just look into their form at the back end of the year. So for me, that's a C-. I'm going to be a bit harsh on them, but yeah, they had a shocking season. Next up, we've got the Sydney Swans, and Sydney's a bit of a tough one to rank. Obviously, they made the grand final. Had a bit of a shaky season, particularly in the middle. Like, it wasn't all smooth sailing like it was for the Cats. But then they did finish the season off strong, I think with 7 wins in a row, which secured a top 4 spot. Then they went on to win 2 finals in a row. But because of that 81-point smashing and a complete embarrassment, to be honest, for the Swans and the Granny, I'm going to give them an A-. They would have been an A for mine if it wasn't for that smashing, if they just would have been more competitive. But an A-, a very shocking way to end the season. And I'm a little bit worried now for the Swans, to be honest, considering they got smashed in the grand final. It's hard for teams to recover, and most teams aren't able to do so. Still a very good season. They made the grand final, probably surpassed expectations, I would say. So an A- for the Swans is probably fair. West Coast will be the second side to be given an F marking, and that's fair enough, an F grading. They finished 17th, and we expect them to slide off, but I don't think we expected the slide off to be as severe. I know I tipped them in 17th, but at least when I tipped them in 17th, I thought they'd be a bit more competitive, win 4+ games at least. They only won the 2, and Jesus, at times they were absolutely disgraceful. They were losing by 70+ points every week, it seemed, just like North Melbourne, the clear 2 worst sides in the comp. They got that win against Essendon, but they had just some more respectable performances, not getting smashed entirely and just competing, even if they didn't get the result they wanted. So, West Coast, you could give out the excuse at the start of the year, all the injuries and the COVID dramas, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they still only ended up winning 2 games. Percentage of under 60%. Almost all other seasons, they'd most likely finish last. And the Western Bulldogs are last side on the list here. Another tough one to grade because, you know, based on their expectations, they certainly underachieved. They should have finished in the top 4. They were aiming to finish in the top 4, but they just had a really disappointing season. Like, they weren't a shite side, but they were just an average side. You know, they just had performances where they just weren't up to it. They would just look second rate. They were just clearly sides better than them, and they were, exposed. They were very lucky to end up making the 8, obviously. So for that, I'll give them a C+. So those were the grades for every team this season in 2022. I gave 4 teams a marking of A or more: the Pies, the Dockers, the Swans, and the Cats. And I gave 2 sides the lowest marking they could possibly get in F, and that was North Melbourne and West Coast. Again, I'd like to see what you guys have to say. If you guys disagree, which I'm sure you would, what markings would you give every team? Or at least the team that you support? Cheers everyone for watching the video. I'll see you soon on the Monday, which will be the weekly vlog and an exciting one. So do not miss out on that one.